Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another edition of the High Five. Today, we're going to talk about what is the best animated movie of all time. Just a quick little discussion. We're going to talk about how do we get up in the morning? How do we get energy, especially on those days where we wake up and maybe it's just a little bit lower? What do we think about networking? How is networking going to work? All these groups that all used to meet in person and shake hands and, wine and dine. How's that going to work in the future? How is it important? And how can we better where we were when this whole pandemic started? We have a sales question. We're going to talk about our reopen guide. All this on the High Five. We are so glad you're here. Let's get started.
The time has come. The questions are set. Opinions high. Discussions are led. Show about nothing and everything. It's all the same. We've got sports, entertainment, sales, and marketing. Time for the High Five. We've got it all covered. It's time for the High Five. We've got it all covered. Yeah, the High Five.
That's right, everybody. It is time for the High Five. Welcome for Tuesday, May 12th. We are 12 days into May. What a wonderful way to do that. And I couldn't imagine spending just a little time with anyone else other than these two gentlemen who are now somewhere on the screen here. Where are they? There they are. All right, gentlemen. I have in the left corner. Let me figure out why I'm hearing myself. Dang. All right. So I'm just going to mess with it. I'm going to take the headphones off for a second. I have in the upper left-hand corner the man, the myth, the legend, the one who runs things in Warsaw, Indiana, makes sure that everything's happening, and is personally supporting every restaurant in Warsaw, Indiana. Mr. Brian Linke, how are you?
I'm great, Nate. Good morning to you. Beautiful day here in Warsaw. Sun's out, freezing cold, but getting ready to hit it hard and want to see some deals today. So Danny and I talked this morning, and I think there's a positive energy going on here.
Absolutely. And in the upper right-hand corner there on our screen, the man from Glenwood Springs, Colorado. He drove in. I'm going to ask him, did he see some elk on the way in this morning to his office? He is holding down the fort in our PayProTec offices in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Mr. Danny Shard. How are you, Danny?
Good morning, Nate. Good morning, Brian. I did see some elk this morning. Every day I get to see elk. It's one of the beauties of living in Colorado. We're pretty lucky.
That is awesome. All right, so let's get started today as we go topic number one. And I'm going to bring up what helps you get up. So yesterday morning, I know for me, I was just simply a little bit sleepy. And so I was trying to figure it out, and why was I just a little bit sleepy? And I probably didn't have the best regimen, didn't sleep the best in the night. And so over the night, there's certain things I do when I wake up and I feel a little groggy. And I was interested, when you're a little bit down, having a little bit rougher day, what are some things you can do and add to your morning to get you focused, get you motivated, get you driven? What are the things you guys do to get going like that?
I actually don't do much. I don't drink coffee regularly. Sometimes I'll have some tea in the morning if it's cold, but otherwise I'm up. I'm at it. A lot of you that know me know that when I get up, it's 100% go time. So I don't really have any like medicine or caffeine or any shot in the arm that I need to get going. I'm naturally excited to start the day every day. I think it's unique, though. Everyone makes fun of me for it.
Dude, that is a skill that is second to none, and I think it isn't most people. For me, I wake up some mornings. It's just hard to get out of. It's not hard to get out of bed. It's just, there's just that moment. And for me, one of the things I've started doing, I've been trying this for the month of May, I'm 12 days in, is doing some yoga. I have a yoga mat, and I spend about 10 minutes just meditating and doing some yoga, stretching, getting the blood flowing. How about you, Brian Linke? What do you do to get going?
Well, let me just comment on that, Nate. I will pay money to see you do yoga.
Let me just say, it's going to have to be a big dime. Big dime.
Check those tours, the Nate Manahan Yoga Fund. Okay, so but you know what? What's crazy is that Danny and I have something in common here because I'm a morning guy too, and people find it strange, but I like it's kind of like my time, right? Because nobody else is up, and so I've always been a morning guy, and I know Danny is because I've actually gotten up in Vegas and walked through the casino at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and there's the big guy sitting at the blackjack table. I'm like, okay, but no, and you know, as you get older, and I've tried to keep myself in halfway decent shape, but as you get older, there are just things that happen to your body that have there's no explanation for them. So I've got a kind of a mental thing in my mind that if I don't get up and actually do something physical, then I'm not gonna, my day will not be fulfilled. So I try to get up and do something in the morning, physical.
See, and that's kind of the yoga thing, and you're not going to probably get if the price is high enough, you may get a still shot. And no, I don't wear yoga pants, but I think for me, and this is one of the things I've learned about morning people. And I read a book called When by Daniel Pink. I think it was 2018 when it came out. And it just talked about how biologically how different of us are wired. And what I've realized is I am what's called an owl, and I wake up around 10 o'clock. I get a burst of energy, and I can get a lot done between 10 and 2. But that also means that it's harder to get up in the morning. And so there's I have to kind of watch the rhythms, make sure I'm getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep, and then making sure that I can manage the schedule. And sometimes that means that I have to get up at 6 a.m. because other people are up. But a lot of times I can, forward shift my schedule and make sure it's making sure it's practical as possible. I think for most people, it's making sure that you have a rhythm and a schedule. And like Brian said, just doing something when you get up. For a while there, I was taking a walk. And during winter, I kind of got out of that because let's be honest, taking a walk in 15 degree, 25 degree weather is not all that interesting to me. Though it would definitely wake me up, but I prefer to be warmer than that. So I think it's like, how do you get going? How do you move it? I think, well, that also then takes us to our other things, because we know that there are people that watch a lot of animated movies to get up. No, that's not true. Bad transition. Absolutely didn't work. But number 2, I just had I have a list, I think, of probably 60 or 70 things. And one of them I was just like looking for something quick. I was interested from these guys, what is the best animated movie they have ever seen? And why is that it? Brian Linke. Go for it, Brian.
I guess the answer for me, and I haven't seen all that many anime. I guess I have when my kids were little. We watched on VHS right in the van. But if I'm if you're going to ask me to pick one, I'll probably have to. It's either Lion King or Space Jam, one of the two. So I'll go ahead and pick. I'll go ahead and pick Space Jam.
Space Jam. That's brilliant right there, because certainly ties into our Last Dance conversations, because how epic was that? I never knew that he literally had a whole basketball court set up in a tent, and it was some of the best basketball Reggie Miller said they'd ever seen when filming Space Jam in 1995. How awesome was that with Michael Jordan? I loved it.
Yep.
All right.
I don't even know if Space Jam counts. It's like half animated, half not. I guess.
I guess a big Lion King then. Okay, what do you mean? I thought this was an open forum. You can answer however you want.
There is no wrong answer, Brian Linke. And
thank you. Nate.
Absolutely. But there are answers that will be ridiculed.
He's always picking on me.
I have to go Lion King. You kind of stole mine.
So the original Lion King or the new one? Because both are technically animated, even though this new one's live action.
It's absolutely the old Lion King. The new one, I've seen it, and I need my animated movies to actually look animated, not too real. The new one is really good, but it's just too real for me.
That's all right. So Lion King, Space Jam, I was just intrigued by this. For me, it's any of the Pixar films, but my favorite Pixar film that still gets me, and it's really that opening sequence, is the movie Up, and just the emotion that can be driven from.
Good movie.
and just like I remember the first time I took my I just had 2 kids at the time, and I took them to a movie theater actually in Toledo, Ohio, where my sister was living at the time, and I remember going to it, and I remember being like, why in the world am I crying in an opening sequence of an animated movie? And that just drew that, it just drew that emotion as you're sitting there. So those are our top movies. I'm interested. Just a little something different there. All right, number 3. We have a lot of interesting things that are happening in the world, and one of them is that the networking groups that people were involved with, or how they would provide and meet new vendors and new opportunities. Well, you can't go do that. And our ETA, which is the big group, is doing their Transact Connect right now, and I was dabbling in it yesterday. And you can virtually go and to each of the booths and the sponsors, and you can watch some of the keynotes that are going on. And that made me start thinking, what is the future of networking? Yesterday we were talking prospecting, but just like getting in to meet people that are going to mentor you, people you can learn from. Maybe it's just being in there. Maybe it's just like getting to those vendors and finding those right partners that are going to be able to do it. Maybe it's finding those BNI, those networking groups where you're actually sharing leads back and forth, where you can't meet in person. And I don't see that happening a huge amount in the next 6 months. So, one, what is the purpose of networking? Is there a good use of it? Can it be refocused a little bit and be thought of in a different way? And then number 2, how do we facilitate that in the post-pandemic age? Let's go. Danny Shard, what do you think?
I mean, I absolutely think networking is a necessity, right? I mean, you've got to do it, especially in an industry like ours. There's so many moving pieces. There's so many different partnerships that all kind of intertwine together in a lot of different ways. And the only ways that you can get connected with a lot of these different systems, vendors, platforms, options is to go to events and network and meet people and learn, right? I agree with you. I'm seeing ETA, the Midwest, Southeast Acquirers I just saw is going to do what are they calling it, Nate? It's like a
virtual. I got the same thing. The virtual.
Yeah, something.
Trade.
Yep.
Something. But they're going to have breakout sessions on different topics, which I think is great. I'm definitely going to attend a few of them just so I can stay sharp on some things. But, I've got a lot of partners, a lot of you out there in like BNI groups and things like that. And I think that's really tough to stay engaged and stay really in that method of networking and aligning with these groups whenever you're doing it through Zoom. I think people want to be in front of people, shaking hands, having a cup of coffee, talking about business and how they're all different, but can all work together in some capacity. I think it's going to take a long time for people to get used to networking that way. And once things open up more, and we get into the post stage of this COVID-19, I think we're going to see it kind of go back to normal because people are going to miss that direct interaction with each other. So I think that part of it's going to be tough. I love the breakout sessions and the kind of learning and things like that, but some of the other networking pieces I think is too hard.
Brian Linke, what do you say?
Well, I agree. I think the only thing that you have to be wary of a little bit, and I've never had a whole lot of success with the network, like going to Chamber of Commerce meetings, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and anything I think is good, right? I mean, I think you just have to be wary of the time commitment that you're putting in, because there's only so many hours in the day. And I just think you have to, one of my things, I've always been a believer in, doing things like, again, in today's day, with this COVID thing, it's a little bit of a different thing, but, going to the same liquor store, over and over and over and over again, and getting to know that owner and buying a 6-pack of beer, 3 or 4 times a week, and then, becoming friends with the guy who knows another guy, who knows another guy. It's the same thing with eating in a restaurant. You keep going back to the same thing, getting to know the owner who knows another guy, who knows another guy, who knows another guy. And there's all kinds of different businesses that you can do that with. So again, that's the old school way, but it definitely works. And but again, I don't think there's any bad thing that you can do. I just think you have to just be just be aware of what the time commitment is, and because we all want to get out there and sell, not just sit around and talk to the people that are our peers. That's I don't know if that's a good answer or a bad answer.
That's a perfect answer.
No, I agree.
And what I was going to add to it was I think this time where we can't just go show up at events helps us take a step back and become more strategic. So one of the guys that I was listening to yesterday, he was, which made me think and add this topic in today, was he was saying, hey, instead of, if you're not going to go to the group and just shake hands with 25 people and share your business card, find 5 people that you have a 1 to 2 degree connection in that you're interested in. Just reach out and say, hey, I'm just trying to network and learn some things from people and do is more one-on-one. Jump on a FaceTime call, jump on just a regular call, jump on Zoom, however you want to do it and facilitate that and try to spread your network. That's the idea of what LinkedIn's supposed to do. I don't know that it always works like that, but part of that is I don't navigate it and groom it the way I probably should in order to do that. But what I can do is say, hey, today I want to meet a plumber. I am just a couple degrees. I don't personally actually know anyone who's a plumber other than the plumber that's helped me out in the past. But I know that I'm 1 or 2 degrees away from someone who knows a plumber. I'm going to reach out and just say, hey, I want to ask you a few questions and get to learn from how your business is working and change that networking mode and try to become extremely strategic. Like Brian would say, don't waste your time just going, because people just go to these sessions and they are a year later and they've been going to these networking groups every week and they're like, what did I get out of it other than a lot of handshakes and some really cool looking business cards? Now, I think there are some that you can be very strategic in going to the groups. You can be very strategic going to the conferences. And in this time where we're focused to be virtual, it's like this ad that I got pushed to me the other day. And I was like, oh, come on, give me a break. But it was for some dating site app. And it said 70% of online daters are willing to do a virtual date. Well, in my head, I started thinking, I think probably it's true 70% of online networkers are willing to do a virtual networking event where it's more one-on-one and more focused and strategic. And it's not just, hey, here are the 4 things I'm going to ask you, and then they can ask you whatever they want, and just getting to know people. It may be something interesting and something I'm actually going to reach out and try. And try to say, hey, how do we bridge that gap? And how do we build that next wave of network? All right, let's go on to number 4 today. The PayProTec Reopen Guide Part 2. Each day this week and probably a little bit into next week, we're kind of talking about a reopen guide. Yesterday, we talked about sanitizing the payments equipment that's out there. Today, we're going to talk about how do we do social distancing and brainstorm some ideas in small retail, small hospitality, small restaurants, where it's a little more difficult to do that. And then what are some tips and tricks we can think of? I know here in Indiana, just yesterday, things started, there was 50% capacity at some restaurants that are within like 10 minutes of me. If I go to the next county over, the county I live in, we have another week before the restaurants open at that capacity. I know in other states, places have been doing that. What are some things you're seeing, hearing, or ideas you've had how to create social distancing in some of these SMBs that we have such a great opportunity to serve?
I'm gonna let Danny go first because I'm not sure if I know what the answer is. I mean, again, this is all. I mean, it's new to everybody. I mean, but Dan, what do you say?
I think there's a lot that SMBs can take from some of the larger retail restaurant merchants that a lot of you have still been able to go to during this time, right? Grocery stores, hardware stores, a lot of the bigger retail chains were considered essential and could all stay open. Some of them at minimum capacity, and others you just saw people just going in and it was still full. But what a lot of you saw was these stores like changing routes that people could take. But more than anything, you saw constant reminders throughout the store to maintain social distancing. And that was done a lot of different ways, whether it's signage at the entrance, signage and shields at the checkout center, tape on the floor that would give people little boxes that, stand here when you're waiting in line, and then the other one's, 6 or 8 feet behind it. And it seems weird. And, I know most of you kind of look at it and laugh, maybe roll your eyes. But the reality is that really helps, right? It reminds us all to do this. And I think that that's really important as your shops open up, as things kind of start phasing in here, that we have reminders to the public to do this. Because I know whenever I see it, I'm like, oh, let me scoot away, because I tend to start getting back into my usual thing, right? And, hey, I'm just going to walk past this person and grab this thing off the shelf. Well, I freaked a lady out at the grocery store the other day because I came pretty close to her grabbing a salsa or something off the shelf, and she gave me the craziest look. We've got to have these reminders, I think, to everybody to do this and to maintain some distance while we open up. And there's just a few simple things that a lot of small, medium businesses can do to do that, and that's just a few of them.
I think what I was thinking is one of the things is making sure you increase the space. So even if you're maybe a 500, 700 square foot store, but if you're putting a huge amount of inventory out in the front of the house, if you have a back of the house that you can keep stuff in and just keep one, so maybe you have 15 different sizes and you're a clothing store, but you can just put one sample out, lessen the amount of display items that you have out. You can then go get them as people have, because you're going to have to help people be safe. Because we've already seen one of the things you're seeing in some of these first opening states is you're seeing little miniature spikes. It's not adding to the whole curve, but any place where people get and take advantage of the opportunity to be out, and they forget, okay, yes, we do need to do it. So, hey, we're in the, we saw this already with some churches where they got together, they didn't sit far enough apart, there was somebody came, had the coronavirus and started spreading it, and suddenly 40% of the population that was there, and these are micro churches at this point, so they're usually like churches of 50 or 60, and they thought, oh, we're going to be just fine. And they saw little spikes. So we don't want to see the little spikes when people come into SMBs. So if you're a restaurant, take out some tables, take out some chairs, spread out some space. If you're a retail, take out some of your display units. Make sure that you are very clear how the checkout process is. If you're able to go hands-free on the checkout, if you're able to start using apps, and this is where we as our partners are able to step in and say, hey, there are ways you can do sales. If you can't just think of any way you have to have 10 people in this 100 square foot store, and that means this is going to be as tight as possible, because how do you fit 10 people in 100 square feet and not be right next to each other? Well, that means that you're going to have to help them think through. Maybe they use a custom app build and figure out how to be able to do a wireless payment or some type of transfer to bring over, and hey, jump on the app, I'm going to send you a text message, hit pay from that text message. All these things that you can start thinking of. But I also think you've got to make sure the hand sanitizer's there, make sure your employees are wearing masks, and then create that space as much as possible, just like the big stores. And I love that, Danny. Watch what the big ones are doing, because they fortunately or unfortunately do have teams of 10, 100 people figuring out how to do this and how to create the best practices, and then steal their ideas and then make them even a little bit yours and say, how can we creatively even make this a fun experience for people? Hey, yes, now there's going back to the idea of the general store where you have one item, you ask it, I'll go back and get it for you and bring it to you. I'm going to set it on this table here, then I'm going to walk away and you can come over and get it. There's things that we can think of to create that social distancing for the time while we need to do this, because we want to see these numbers go down. We don't want to see any spikes, and we don't want SMBs to be the reason because we did it, because doggone it, we've got an opportunity to recreate our business, reopen, and we want this reopen guide to go. Gentlemen, anything else you have to say?
Well, okay, here's the thing. Okay, being number 3 on this question, I may as well just...
I love the idea of keeping it fun, by the way, right? Like, I think a lot of people are over it. I know Brian and I talked about this the other day. Like, we're just, we're over it, but, we can't get careless. And so, kind of, having a laugh about it, keeping it fun. I think that's a really good idea. Sorry to interrupt, Brian, but I had to.
No, keeping it fun. I actually almost saw a fist fight the other day in the grocery store over this. It was awesome. I mean, I just stood there and watched it, and these guys just took it to the next level. And because I think what happened was the guy stepped over the tape on the floor. And it's like, hey, dude, relax. But I think that just to end on this, because you guys have touched on every single thing, but just common sense, right? I mean, that's really all it is. And I mean, we just have to, we never used to have to think before, right? When you leave to go into the, wings, et cetera, you never really had to think before. Now, you just have to think a little bit about like what you're doing and how to go about it, and just use your common sense.
Absolutely. That's what we're about. We're all about common sense, I think, and just trying to, none of us have done this before, and let's just keep learning and helping. And this is the consultative process of the sales process. And so yesterday, as we go into number 5, and we take off again because I've given the challenge to Danny and Brian. Yesterday, we talked about what they would do there's 2 things we go to the gates. I said yesterday, all they had was a cell phone, they had a computer, no current portfolio, how would they start their merchant services and POS sales business? And yesterday we talked about prospecting. Well, prospecting has to turn into how do I identify that these are qualified leads and move them to the businesses that I can help and businesses that we can actually, that we have the service to help with, and they're actually going to make us a little money. Because one of the things in choosing in this industry is we've got to figure out there are businesses that we won't make money on, and that we can help them find other ways to take payments. And not through us, because it's unfortunately just not worth our time. But we have to figure out, are these qualified leads? Are they able to do business? We can give them help and meet a need they have. And then can they actually then meet a need I have to make just a little bit of profit? And that's how the world works. Brian, Danny, let's go. Mr. Linky, go first. How do you judge and start identifying if a merchant is a good qualified lead, something that you can help them with, something, and that they're going to be a good business for you? Ask
open-ended questions.
Okay. Yep.
That's the simple answer, in my opinion, is ask open-ended questions. So when you're talking to somebody, rather than asking them a question that requires a yes or a no answer, if you can get people to talk about their business, you can find out a little bit more about their business. You'll have some idea, I guess, when you walk in. Like, for example, like if you walk into the barber shop here that charges $9 a haircut. Everybody mostly pays cash. Obviously, they're probably not the prospect that you're going to want to go after. But when you're talking to people, when you start asking open-ended questions and getting them to talk. Because again, asking a closed-ended, a yes or a no answer, those are the easy questions. But if you can get people to start talking, I think they'll answer this particular qualified type thing themselves, and then you'll without even having to work a whole lot, you'll find out whether or not they're a qualified lead or not just by getting into a conversation and asking open-ended questions.
So, Brian, I like that. Brian, what are some of the answers that you hear that you go, wow, okay, this is not the right business? You mentioned average transaction size and volume. That's one of the things that you want to get them to tell without asking that question. You can ask, what is your volume? But that's not very open-ended, so you can get them to tell that story. What are other things that you hear that you go, okay, well, red flag, this may not be the right qualified lead for me?
Well, one is if people aren't familiar with cash discounting, right? Because anybody's a lead if they're willing to do cash discounting within reason. But I think just some of the other red flags just would be, how many cash payments do they take? And just really, again, it's just, I think it's just more of finding out about their business, asking the right questions, taking a little bit of time to find out, and then it's hey, can I don't know if I can save you any money. Can I take a look at a statement? And because even if you decide not to go with us, not to go with PayProTec, at least this will give you some idea of what you're doing compared to what we can do. And if you decide not to do it, we'll shake hands, or we'll elbow bump, or we'll do whatever, and we'll move on.
Love it. So, Danny, what for you? Like if let's say you could walk in, or you identify that they have changed merchant services or POS systems 5 times in the last 2 years. Is that a red flag to you as you're identifying that's part of their story? If you're walking in, sometimes you see the cemetery of old hardware sitting on the back counter, or in telling their story, if you're over the phone, they may say, "Hey, back when I used this company," and then you notice they mentioned 3 different companies all that time. Is that a red flag for you? What are some of the things you're doing to try to say, "Hey, these people aren't qualified leads"?
I'll say yes and no, and that's a really good question. And it's funny, Nate, because the cemetery of old equipment on the shelf behind them, that's so real. I think a lot of sales partners and even merchants that are listening can relate to that, that may have switched and been sold something that wasn't a good fit for their business. And the reason I say yes, that it's alarming, is because obviously that merchant doesn't have much loyalty, right? Not necessarily that they have to, but they may not have been given the best service, or quick to take the next pitch of somebody that's going to save them even a few dollars, and not necessarily giving their current salesperson the opportunity to save them. Maybe their support just hasn't been great, so you can't really blame them for that. But then no, it doesn't throw up a red flag, because I think that's an opportunity that merchant has clearly not been sold correctly, right? There should be a thorough process, and Nate, what you preach about is solution fitting, right? And I think every merchant should go through like a qualification or some sort of solutions, and have a deep consultation, especially when you're talking about point of sale systems, to make sure that this system does meet or exceed the requirements of the merchant, and they're not going to be interested in looking elsewhere. So when you see that cemetery of equipment, that just means that it didn't do anything that they wanted it to do, but they were sold on it. So they're easily sold, but they're easy to switch because they learn quickly that they don't have the right solution. So I think it's an opportunity for a lot of seasoned sales partners out there to take that conversation a little deeper with the merchant. I actually have a tendency of overanalyzing questions like this, because I thought, man, who's a qualified lead and how do you do that? And any merchant that accepts payments is the first thing that comes to my head, right? Like, that's a qualified lead. I think, as you dig into it, like Brian's saying, which I love, that is asking open-ended questions, getting the merchant talking is really important, because that's going to be a way that you can qualify them. And it's learning how they operate their business, products that they sell. A few key factors are going to determine if that's a qualified merchant that you can accept payments for, right? Some of them might sell products that are too high risk, or just do some processes that we can't offer, which is extremely rare. But that's why I say every merchant taking payments technically is a qualified lead that we should be able to take the conversation further, because we've got every option covered, whether they're really small or very large. We've got options to cover the whole fleet. So it's just a matter of finding that right solution for them.
I love it. That's more and more, that is the solution fitting. We can help every merchant, especially in the edge world. Now, I would say there are, though, times where the headache is just not worth it. And in our industry, and so many industries of their sales, the margin and the residual, maybe $10, $20, $50 a month. And if they're going to take up 50 hours of my time that month, they're not worth it. Are there things that you've learned now doing this for Brian pushing a decade, Danny pushing 2 decades, that these are things that the headaches just aren't worth it? If I can identify this ahead of time, then I'm going to move on and go to the next one, because the sales process just going to either take too long, too much of a headache there, or I can tell this is just going to be a leech to my soul, and I'm going to wake up really depressed some mornings because of them. So I'm going to cut it off now. What are some of the things that you've identified that you'd want to be able to identify to be able to see that?
Well, I can tell you this: as you get older, okay, it gets smaller, right? So, again, helping people is part of the job. That's another thing that a lot of salespeople don't understand. Selling is that's obviously what you have to do, but trying to maintain the account, the customer service portion is the back end of it. Is as important, if not more important, to keep that merchant, especially with the way our bonus structure is here at PayProTec. But I just think that again, it's just a common sense thing. You have to treat every merchant like they're important, right? But obviously, some are more important than others. And once it gets to a point where it may not be worth it, then it's not easy. But you're gonna have to cut the string and move on, because there's somebody else out there that's willing to have that conversation with you, sign that merchant up, and move on.
Yeah, and that's so tough, right? I mean, Brian, I think I know we've talked about this, and I think we've both dealt with merchants, through the years that we've set up accounts. In addition to helping partners, we've both dealt with merchants that at a certain point we wish we hadn't signed up. And I think you get to the point where when that phone rings and you look down and it's that merchant, you're struggling to answer because you know that there's a problem. A lot of times, the issue can be either technical with their system, not getting funding, or just very small things that add up for the business owner. And they're all important for the business owner, but some of them can feel like they're minimal, or gosh, that seems very nitpicky to the partner's end. So it's important for partners to obviously stay patient and understand each merchant has their own needs and requests and different requirements and things like that. But yeah, I think that's the toughest decision that any salesperson would have to make, is firing a customer, right? Or identifying that this customer is going to be a lot of legwork and not enough profit for me on the back end, which you run into with a lot of those smaller merchants doing, just hundreds of dollars, maybe $1,000, $2,000 in processing a month. There's more and more partners that just don't want to deal with that hassle. And that's why we've come up with programs like our pay-as-you-go or our flat rate program, because 99 problems that these people have, or 99% of the time that these people have problems, it's in regards to fees, right? The majority of them are just using a basic terminal or even a mobile unit, which is more popular for these smaller merchants. And it was all about the fees. Hey, I got charged this $9 and this and that, and it's just too much. So if you can set them up with something like that and rarely hear from them because they've got an easy solution, that's ideal. But I'll say that, in my opinion, that's where Square saved all of us from a lot of headaches, right? On some of these really micro, small accounts, that they were just more of a better fit for a solution like that, where we all knew Square lost money, but it was seamless, very low pricing. Square's losing money, and they're dealing with some of the smaller merchants like that. I think that was a huge win for our industry whenever they were taking some of those merchants off some plates.
Well, the other thing is too, it's become a little bit easier to fire a merchant. I guess that's what we're talking about, right? In the world of cash discount.
We're just not moving forward with one because
right.
of that.
It's just easier to, that little guy who's not making you a whole lot of residual, who's not open to cash discounting. It's a little bit easier today. And again, a lot of these new agents that are coming on board, I think, are extremely fortunate in the fact that we have cash discounting today, because as we all know, it's not I wouldn't say it's a brand new thing, but it's a fairly new thing. And again, the merchant that's on tiered pricing or interchange plus pricing, that's making you dollars rather than it's like, okay, again, back in the day, I don't like to lose, right? You never want to cut somebody off, but in the world of cash discounting today, you send one other merchant up, it can take the place of 3 or 4 that just they weren't worth your time.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, one of the things, I was talking to a merchant actually yesterday, that it was a prospective new merchant possibility. And one of the questions I asked them, I wanted an open question, like Brian suggests and teaches, is I said, so tell me, where do you see yourself in the next 6 months now that you're in this current reality? And the first thing they said to me was, I just don't know if we're going to be surviving. And, I may just give up in a couple months. I'm going to make that decision. And so immediately what I said to them was, you know what? Then don't make a change of your payments right now. but I'm here to help any way you can. And when you make that decision that I'm going to go and I'm going to fight for and try to go for the next year, I'm not, I'm your man. I'm here to help you. We'll help you figure this out, and we'll save you money.
Look at you,
we'll do
Nate.
it.
Look at you, Nate. I like that.
But so one of those things for me is like, hey,
if they're the microphone and onto the street, that's where you need to be.
But I think one of those things are of those that they have to know. You have to know whether they're going to be in business. And if you can kind of, you can't predict it 100%, but there are a lot of times where you just know, these people may not have the fight in it right now. And if you're honest with them and say, look, I think you need to work on these 3 things. When you're done with those 3 things, maybe it's, hey, you need to work on your inventory control because you have boxes, all that you're buying twice as much as you're trying to sell. Or maybe it's that, hey, your menu needs to be fixed before. Work on these things. When you're done with that, let's talk about how we fix your payments. Because right now you're taking payments. I can do it better for you, but you need to fix these things. Then you can kind of judge, are these people in it for the long haul? Because one of the biggest issues in our industry is most small businesses don't make it. This was true before COVID-19. It's even more true now. And it's not that we don't want to help, because I definitely want to help, but I also don't want to go through all the process that it takes to get an account up and running and help them figure out all their paperwork that they need to do and install and all that, and they close a month later, because that just leaves us all hanging in the wind and just trying to figure out, okay, what do we do with this equipment? How do we get it back? Suddenly they have early termination fees if they were some of the POS, if they weren't month to month with us. Was most of the time they're month to month, but maybe they decided to put a POS. We've seen this. Restaurants they buy 3 stations of a point of sale or go into one of our placement programs, and then they're closed a month later. And we're trying to figure out, how do we get into the barred up building to get our equipment back that we gave them for free, or for the expectation that they be with us for 24 months. So if I can identify that ahead of time, I'm going to do all the questions. And I think that's the more conversation you make mental notes, and really I would say even physical notes of things that you want to do. What are things you don't want to have in a merchant? Obviously, you don't want to have a merchant that's going to close. You don't want to have a merchant that is going to cause you and call you more than they should because they're not self-reliant. Like one of the things I like try to figure out with merchants, or really anything I'm doing, is like, are these people that are going to try to fix their own problems sometimes, or is it always just going to be a call with me? And then is that worth it for whatever volume they're going to do? Because sometimes, yes, the answer Brian says as he gets older, yes to every answer. But sometimes it's like, you know what? You're a micro merchant like Danny was going to talk about. I think the best solution for you is to go over to Square. As you grow, then maybe there's some opportunities here for us. Let's be honest and teach and coach. Gentlemen, anything last things to add when we're talking about identifying qualified leads and making sure as we meet people that we transition to making proposals and things like that in the coming days, just making sure that we're talking to the right people?
Well, Nate, I think you've hit on a really good point.
All right, Danny, we'll let Danny go.
I think you hit on a really good point that a lot of salespeople need to take is, Nate, I mean, there's a lot of, going out right now anyway, there's a lot of sales tactics that are pushing merchants into certain directions, right? Obviously, cash discounts extremely popular. So trying to push merchants into that direction is a goal for a lot of partners, but I don't think that there's enough listening. And I think you've hit on a really good point there that a lot of people can take note on, is just being real with merchants, right? What are their goals for their business? Asking those types of questions, and that response can drive you. And I'm telling you, merchants are going to appreciate it, and you're going to have that customer eventually if you don't sign them up right now.
Yep, absolutely. All right, gentlemen, as we fight through this day where we have all kinds of fun going on, trying to figure out when Zoom gives us a little latency that's a little annoying, it is time for us to kind of finish up the day. As we do, I always give the last words to Brian and to Danny as they look to, encourage us, challenge us, maybe tell us to have a little bit of fun. So, Mr. Brian Linke, what say you today? We have huge latency issues.
I'm going to say it again. Go get a haircut, get out of bed, get out on the street. Really? Get out on the street and start working again.
Absolutely. All right, Danny Shard, how about you? As we fight through this, you hear me 5 seconds after I talk.
Yeah, we're ending the day on a high note, and good luck to everybody that's getting back out there. Stay safe, and reach out if you need any help. You've got my number, 281-301-1086. If I can do anything for you, let me know, and go get them. Have fun out there.
All right, this has been another high five where sometimes you hear us in real time and sometimes we're fighting through all the sounds. And this is how the world works right now. And sometimes the internet just is a little bit slower. And come on, Comcast, give me a little bit more upload speed. I'm paying for gigabit. Come on, boys. All right, so this has been a great another high five. We'll break this up in a couple spits. I think a couple of these are going to be great segments. Hopefully you've watched. If you have questions, concerns, reach out to us anytime. Danny just gave his cell phone number or his phone number. Where else are you going to get that? Call him up. Give him a little love. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And this has been another high five.
The time has come, the questions are said, opinions hide, discussions are led, a show about nothing and everything, it's all the same. We've got sports, entertainment, sales, and marketing. It's time for the high five. We've got it all covered. It's time for the high five. We've got it all covered, yeah. The high five.
The high five.